I saw her by accident. A dim gas station, half empty, lights buzzing overhead. A beat-up van parked off to the side. And inside it, my daughter, curled up in the driver's seat, fast asleep, her child pressed against her chest like she was shielding them from the world. For a second, my brain refused to accept it, because just months ago, I had bought her an apartment. A safe place. A future. I knocked on the window. She woke up, saw me, and tried to smile. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. I asked her the question gently at first, the way you do when you're afraid of the answer. "Why are you here?" I said. "Why are you sleeping in a van?" She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. Her child stirred, made a small sound, and she immediately wrapped her arms tighter around them, like someone might try to take them away even now. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. "It's just for tonight." That was when my chest tightened. Parents know that tone. The one that means please don't push, because if you do, I will fall apart. I swallowed and asked the question that had been burning in my throat since the moment I recognized her face behind that fogged-up window. "Where's the apartment I bought for you?" Her breath hitched. She didn't answer right away. She pressed her lips together, nodded as if agreeing with something in her own head, then shook her head again. Tears slid down her cheeks, silently at first, then all at once. Her shoulders began to shake, and she turned her face away from me, ashamed, like she was the one who had done something wrong. That sound she made then, half sob, half apology, will haunt me for the rest of my life. "I don't live there anymore," she whispered. My heart dropped. "What do you mean you don't live there?" She wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket and finally looked at me. Her eyes were red and swollen, hollow in a way I had never seen before. "My husband said, my mother-in-law said," her voice cracked. "They said I have no right to it." The words didn't make sense at first. They just floated there between us, heavy and unreal. "No right?" I repeated. "No right to what?" "To the apartment," she said. "They said because it wasn't in my name, it wasn't mine. That I was just living there because they allowed it." I felt heat rush to my face. I remembered the day I handed over the keys. I remembered her smile, the way she hugged me and said, "Thank you, Baba. Now my child will grow up safe." I remembered trusting the man she married, trusting his family, trusting that my job was done. "What happened?" I asked, though every muscle in my body was already bracing for the answer. She took a deep breath, like she was about to jump into cold water. "It started slowly," she said. "Comments. Little things. My mother-in-law would remind me that it was her son's home, that I should be grateful, that women who depend on their parents are weak." I clenched my fists. "She went through my cupboards," my daughter continued. "Criticized how I cooked, how I raised my child. If I said anything, my husband would tell me to be quiet, to stop causing problems." I could see it clearly now. The isolation, the erosion, the way control creeps in dressed as tradition and family values. "Then last week," she said, her voice barely audible now, "they told me to leave." My head rang. Just like that. They said I was disrespectful, that I poisoned my husband against his mother. She told me to pack my things and go to my father's house, since I was still his responsibility. Her words stabbed deeper with every sentence. "I asked about my child," she said. "I asked where we were supposed to go. My husband didn't even look at me. He said, 'That's not my problem anymore.'" I felt something inside me break. "And the apartment?" I asked, though I already knew. "They changed the locks," she whispered. "I wasn't even allowed to take everything. Just a bag. I slept at a friend's place for 2 nights, but she couldn't keep us longer. So I came here." She gestured weakly around the van. Blankets piled in the back. A plastic bag with clothes. A half-empty bottle of water. That was it. That was her life now. My daughter, who had done everything right, who had trusted, who had endured. I felt fury like I had never known. Not loud fury. Not shouting fury. The kind that goes cold and sharp and steady, the kind that makes decisions. I thought of the nights I worked late to afford that apartment, of the paperwork, the sacrifices, of how proud I was that she would never have to beg anyone for a roof over her head. And now she was begging reality itself. I opened the van door wider and crouched in front of her. "Listen to me," I said, my voice low and firm. "You are not staying here another minute." She shook her head immediately. "I don't want to cause trouble. They said if I come back, they'll—" I cut her off. "You are not the problem," I said. "And you are not homeless." She looked at me, confused, exhausted, broken. "Get out," I said again, more gently now. "Take your child. Bring whatever you have." She hesitated. Years of being told to obey don't disappear in one moment. Even now, part of her was afraid to move without permission. I reached out my hand. "Come with me," I said.
Now.
Her child woke up fully then, eyes blinking, tiny fingers clutching her jacket. She kissed their forehead, whispered something to calm them, and slowly climbed out of the van. When she stood up, I realized how thin she had become, how small, how much she had been carrying alone. I took the bag from her shoulder, placed it in my car, and helped her into the passenger seat. She buckled her child in the back, her hands still trembling. As I closed the door and walked around to the driver's side, I looked once more at the van. At the place where my daughter had been sleeping while people who had no right to her safety enjoyed. The home I paid for. I started the engine. As we pulled away from the gas station, my daughter leaned her head against the window and finally let herself cry, not quietly this time, but in deep, shuddering sobs that came from somewhere far below the surface. I didn't tell her everything would be okay. I didn't promise miracles. I just drove. Because in my mind, one thought was already clear and unshakable. They had made a very serious mistake, and they were about to learn exactly who they had taken something from. I took them straight to my house. Not the guest room. Not the couch. I gave her my bedroom and told her not to argue. She tried, of course. She always had that instinct to minimize herself, to not be a burden, even now. I shut it down with a look. "Sleep," I said. "Both of you. Everything else can wait until morning." She didn't fight me after that. Exhaustion won. I watched her lay her child down on my bed, arranging the blanket with the same care she used when she was little and afraid of thunderstorms. Within minutes, they were both asleep. Deep, desperate sleep. The kind that only comes when your body finally believes it's safe. I stayed awake. I made tea I didn't drink. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. My hands were steady now, but my mind was not. It replayed everything she had said, every insult, every cruelty disguised as authority. No right. Those words burned. At dawn, while the house was still quiet, I opened the folder I hadn't touched in years. The one labeled with the apartment's address. Receipts. Agreements. Bank statements. Things I kept not because I was suspicious, but because I was careful. I had paid for that apartment outright. Not partially. Not as a gift passed through someone else. Every transfer had come from my account. I remembered the discussion back then. Her husband had insisted it be simpler to keep the paperwork under his family's management. He said it was temporary. He said it was cultural. He said it was safer. I remembered hesitating. And then trusting. I felt the familiar sting of regret, but I didn't let it slow me. Regret was useless now. Action was not. By mid-morning, my daughter woke up and came into the kitchen. She looked startled when she saw me still sitting there. "You didn't sleep," she said. "I slept enough," I replied. She poured tea, with shaking hands. "I don't want you to fight them," she said quietly. "They'll make things ugly." I looked at her. Really looked at her. "They already did," I said. She flinched. "I just want peace," she whispered. "I don't even care about the apartment anymore. I just want my child safe." That was the moment I understood how thoroughly they had broken her sense of fairness. How survival had replaced justice in her mind. "You don't have to care," I said.
Ido.
That afternoon I made calls. Not angry calls. Calm ones. I spoke to a lawyer I trusted, someone who didn't raise his voice or dramatize. I laid out the facts. He listened, asked questions, took notes. Then he said something that made me close my eyes in relief. They don't own anything, he said. Not legally. Not even close. My daughter sat across from me, listening without speaking. The apartment was registered under a holding arrangement. The lawyer continued. You are the sole financial source. Their occupancy means nothing without your consent. So, they can't kick her out? I asked. They already did, he said. But they had no right to. I thanked him and ended the call. My daughter stared at me. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, they lied to you. She pressed her lips together. Years of humiliation don't disappear just because the law is on your side. That evening, her husband called. I watched her phone light up on the table. His name flashed across the screen like a dare. She didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Finally, I picked it up. Hello, I said. There was silence on the other end. Then confusion. Then irritation. Who is this? This is her father. His tone changed instantly. Polite. Controlled.
Fake.
There's been a misunderstanding, he said. This is a family matter.
No, iraplia.
This is a legal one. He laughed nervously. Let's not involve outsiders. You already did, I said. When you threw my daughter and her child onto the street. His voice hardened. She disrespected my mother. And you abandoned your child, I said. Which one of those do you think a judge cares about? He swore under his breath and hung up. 2 days passed. They thought silence would intimidate us. That my daughter would crawl back. That fear would do their work for them. Instead, a notice arrived. Formal.
Clean.
Unemotional. It stated the facts. The ownership. The unlawful eviction. The deadline to vacate. My daughter read it 3 times. They're going to hate me, she said. They already do, I replied. Hate is cheap. Safety is not. The next call came from the mother-in-law. She didn't bother pretending. How dare you embarrass us, she snapped. That apartment is our son's home. It never was, I said. You gave it, she said. I allowed my daughter to live there. I corrected. You confused permission with ownership. She screamed. She threatened. She invoked God and neighbors and shame. I waited until she ran out of breath. Your son has until Friday, I said. After that, the locks change. She hung up. Friday came faster than they expected. I didn't go alone. I brought the lawyer, a locksmith, and a police officer because I don't believe in dramatics, but I believe in documentation. The door was opened by my son-in-law, his confidence evaporating the moment he saw who stood behind me. His mother appeared seconds later, already yelling. The neighbors watched from doorways. Curtains shifted. The officer explained the situation calmly. The locksmith went to work. My daughter stood beside me, silent, trembling. When the door opened and they were told to remove their belongings, something in her posture changed. Just a little. Her shoulders lifted. Her eyes steadied. They begged. They blamed. They cried. No one listened. When it was over, the apartment was empty. Quiet. Mine again. I handed my daughter the keys. For now, I said. You stay with me. We'll do this properly. She held them like they might disappear. That night, as we drove back, she leaned her head against the seat and said something she hadn't said since she was a child. Thank you for coming for me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I should have come sooner, I said. But the truth was simpler. They thought she had no rights. They were wrong. And this time, they would never forget it. The weeks that followed were quieter on the surface, but underneath, everything was changing. My daughter stayed with me longer than she planned. At first, she kept saying, just a few days, then, maybe until the child settles. Then eventually she stopped explaining at all. She began to breathe differently. She slept through the night. She laughed softly at things that weren't funny, simply because she could. But healing doesn't move in straight lines. Some mornings she woke up disoriented, reaching for her phone in panic, expecting messages filled with accusations. Other days she flinched when the doorbell rang. Trauma has a way of lingering, even when the danger is gone. I watched her closely, not like a guard, but like a witness. I let her talk when she wanted. I let her be silent when she didn't. And every time she apologized for taking space, for eating my food, for needing help, I reminded her of the truth. This is your home too, I said. You never stopped belonging here. The legal process moved forward steadily. I transferred the apartment properly this time. No shortcuts, no favors, no temporary arrangements. Everything was done in her name, with protections built in so no one could ever question her right again. When I handed her the final documents, she stared at them for a long time. It feels strange, she admitted. Like I'm waiting for someone to tell me it's not really mine. No one can, I said. And even if they try, they'll be talking to walls. She nodded, but I could see the doubt still flickering behind her eyes. Her husband didn't disappear quietly. He sent messages late at night. Long ones. Angry ones. Apologetic ones. Promises wrapped in guilt. Threats disguised as concern. Yuri breaking the family. My mother is sick because of this. Think about your child. She didn't reply. The day she blocked his number was the day I knew she was beginning to reclaim herself. Still, there was one thing left. Closure doesn't always come from silence. Sometimes it comes from standing your ground when the past knocks again. That knock came one afternoon when we least expected it. I was in the kitchen. My daughter was helping her child color at the table. There was a knock at the door, sharp, impatient, familiar. My daughter froze. I'll handle it, I said. But she stood up anyway. No, she said quietly. I will. When she opened the door, her mother-in-law stood there, rigid and pale, clutching her purse like a weapon. Behind her, her husband hovered, eyes darting, calculating. They looked smaller than I remembered. We need to talk, the older woman said. My daughter didn't step aside. She didn't invite them in. You can talk, she said. From there. Her husband scoffed. Is this how you treat family now? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. This is how I protect my child, she replied. The mother-in-law's face tightened. You've humiliated us. You've turned everyone against us. My daughter tilted her head slightly. No. You did that yourselves. There was a long silence. Her husband tried a different approach. Softer. Sadder. I made mistakes, he said. But we can fix this. Come back. Things will be different. My daughter smiled then, not kindly, not cruelly, just clearly. You already showed me who you are, she said. I believe you. That was it. No shouting. No dramatic exit. Just truth, delivered calmly. They left without another word. When the door closed, my daughter leaned against it, shaking, not from fear, but from release. Her child looked up at her and asked, Mama, are we okay? She knelt down, hugged them tightly, and said, Yes, we are. A month later, she moved back into the apartment. I helped her unpack. We hung curtains together. She chose new colors, new furniture, small things that mattered because they were hers. The first night she slept there, she called me. I just wanted you to know, she said. I locked the door and, for the first time, it felt peaceful. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. People talk about revenge like it's loud, like it needs witnesses, like it ends with someone screaming. But this wasn't revenge. This was restoration. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't boast, doesn't ask permission. The kind that rebuilds what was broken and leaves no room for doubt. Sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like a mother sleeping in her own bed, with her child safe beside her, and the quiet certainty that no one will ever take that away again. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. Healing rarely gives you that kind of neat ending. What it gave us instead was something steadier, routine, strength, and clarity. My daughter began rebuilding in small, deliberate steps. She enrolled her child in a nearby school, one she could walk to if she wanted. She found part-time work at first, not because she had to, but because she wanted to feel capable again on her own terms. Every paycheck, no matter how small, seemed to add a layer back to her confidence. Sometimes, in the evenings, we would sit together, without speaking much. Her child would play on the floor, humming softly, completely unaware of how close their life had come to being defined by fear and instability. Watching them, I often felt a heavy mix of gratitude and anger, gratitude that we caught it in time, anger that we had needed to catch it at all. One night, she surprised me. "I keep thinking about the gas station," she said suddenly. I looked at her. "What about it?" "If you hadn't stopped there, if you hadn't seen me," her voice trailed off. I didn't let her finish. "But I did," I said. "And you don't have to carry the what-ifs." She nodded, but I could tell that moment had carved itself into her memory the same way it had carved itself into mine. Some experiences never fade. They just lose their power over you. Her husband tried one last tactic. A formal letter arrived, carefully worded, requesting mediation. He framed it as concern for the child, as an attempt at reconciliation. The language was smooth, almost impressive, clearly coached. My daughter read it slowly, then folded it neatly, and placed it back in the envelope. "I don't want to respond," she said. "You don't have to," I replied. She smiled faintly. "That's the part I'm still getting used to. I don't have to." Weeks later, the legal separation was finalized. No dramatic courtroom scene.
No shouting.
Just signatures, quiet nods, and a door closing forever. Afterward, we went for tea. She stirred her cup thoughtfully. "I used to think strength meant enduring," she said. "Now I think it means choosing not to." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She had already said everything. As time passed, something unexpected happened. Her story spread. Not publicly, not on social media, but quietly through relatives, neighbors, acquaintances who whispered about what had really happened. About the apartment. About the eviction. About how the narrative they had been told was false. People who once avoided her began greeting her warmly again. Some apologized. Some didn't. She accepted what she needed and ignored the rest. The mother-in-law never reached out again. The silence from that side was loud, but it was also peaceful. One afternoon, months later, I visited the apartment unannounced. I let myself in with the spare key she insisted I keep. Music was playing softly. The smell of fresh food filled the air. Her child ran toward me, laughing, showing me a drawing taped proudly to the wall. It was a house, with a sun above it, and 3 stick figures holding hands. "Who's that?" I asked gently. The child pointed.
Mama. Me.
"And you." I turned away quickly, pretending to inspect the window, because my eyes suddenly burned. My daughter noticed anyway. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed my arm. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, she walked me to the door. "You know," she said, "for a long time I thought I failed. As a wife, as a daughter, as a mother." I shook my head, but she continued. "But now I understand something. I didn't fail. I survived long enough to escape." I looked at her then. Not the frightened woman in the van, not the broken one on my bed, but the person she had always been underneath all of that. Strong.
Kind. Awake.
"I'm proud of you," I said. She smiled. A real one. As I drove away, I thought back to that night at the gas station. To the cold air, the buzzing lights, the van that held everything she had left. That moment could have been the end of her story. Instead, it became the beginning of a different one. And every time I stop for fuel now, every time I see someone sleeping in their car, I remember something important. You never know how close someone is to losing everything. And you never know how powerful it can be when someone shows up and says, "Get out.
Come with me. Now."
Years later, people would still ask her how she found the courage to walk away. They expected a dramatic answer. A moment of sudden bravery.
A speech.
A breaking point. She always shook her head. It wasn't courage, she said. It was exhaustion. Exhaustion from explaining herself. Exhaustion from shrinking. Exhaustion from being told she had no rights in a life she was bleeding for. What they never saw was the quiet work that came after. The therapy sessions she almost skipped. The nights she woke up from dreams where she was locked out again. The moments she doubted herself even while standing on solid ground. Strength didn't arrive all at once. It arrived slowly, disguised as ordinary days. A morning where she drank tea without fear. An afternoon where her child laughed freely. An evening where the door stayed locked and no one knocked. I watched her change from a distance, careful not to hover. Parents want to protect, but sometimes protection means trusting your child to grow beyond survival. One day, she surprised me again. She invited me over and handed me an envelope. Inside was a copy of the apartment deed, but there was something new added beneath her name. A small legal note. Beneficiary, my child. She looked at me, eyes steady. No one will ever question their right to safety again, she said. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. That was when I understood something deeply. This was never just about an apartment, or a betrayal, or revenge. It was about breaking a cycle. The cycle where women are taught to endure quietly, where kindness is mistaken for weakness, where love is used as leverage. She broke it not by fighting loudly, but by refusing to return. The last time I heard anything about her former husband, it came through someone else. He had moved. His family had fractured. The stories no longer matched, and people stopped listening. Power fades quickly when it has no one left to control. My daughter never celebrated that. She didn't need to. Her victory looked like this. A home filled with light. A child who slept without fear. A woman who knew her worth without asking permission. And me? I learned something too. That sometimes being a parent doesn't end when your child grows up. Sometimes it begins again. At a gas station. Under buzzing lights. When you see your child sleeping in a van, and you choose, without hesitation, to say, "Get out.
Come with me. Now."
Even now, long after everything's settled, that night still visits me when I least expect it. I'll be driving past a gas station, slowing down to refuel, and for a split second my chest tightens. I scan the parked cars without meaning to. Old vans. Fogged windows. Shadows that look like people sleeping. I never find her there again, but the memory stays. My daughter moved forward in ways that surprised even her. She didn't harden. She didn't turn bitter. Instead, she became precise. Careful with her trust. Clear with her boundaries. She started speaking up, not loudly, not aggressively, but without apology. When someone dismissed her opinion, she didn't argue. She simply disengaged. When relatives tried to suggest reconciliation for the child's sake, she calmly replied, "My child already is peace." That sentence ended a lot of conversations. Her child grew too. Stronger.
Happier.
Unafraid of raised voices because there were none. Unafraid of doors closing because they always opened again. One evening, while we were sitting on the balcony of her apartment, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, she said something I wasn't prepared for. "I used to think losing my marriage meant I failed," she said. "Now I think staying would have meant I disappeared." I looked at her profile in the dim light. She wasn't asking for reassurance. She already knew. "I'm glad you didn't disappear," I said. She smiled softly. "Me too." There are people who still don't understand her choice. People who believe endurance is the same as virtue. People who think walking away is weakness. She doesn't try to convince them. She lives. And that, I've learned, is the most convincing argument of all. As for me, I no longer assume my work as a parent is finished just because my child is grown. Love doesn't retire. Responsibility doesn't expire. If anything, it sharpens. That night at the gas station taught me something I will carry forever. Sometimes the most important thing you can give your child isn't advice, or money, or protection from the world. Sometimes it's permission. Permission to leave. Permission to start over. Permission to believe they deserve more. I gave my daughter that permission the moment I said, "Get out and come with me now." And she did the rest herself. There is one more thing people don't talk about when stories like this are told. What happens after the lesson is learned. Not the victory. Not the justice. But the quiet responsibility that follows. Because Once my daughter rebuilt her life, others started to notice. A cousin called one night, voice low, asking questions that sounded harmless on the surface. A neighbor's wife lingered too long after a visit, eyes full of things she didn't say. An old friend messaged my daughter, asking, "How did you know when it was time to leave?" My daughter never told them what to do. She just told the truth. "I didn't know," she would say. "I just stopped lying to myself." That honesty did something powerful. It gave people language for feelings they'd buried. It gave them permission to question situations they had been told were normal. Slowly, without announcements or applause, the ripples spread. One woman left a house she had been afraid to abandon. Another demanded her name be added to documents she had helped pay for. Someone else simply started saving money in her own account for the first time. No one credited my daughter publicly. That was never the point. Change rarely arrives with credit. It arrives with courage borrowed quietly from someone else's example. One evening, my daughter asked me something that caught me off guard. "Do you ever feel guilty?" she asked. "For not seeing it sooner?" I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said. "Sometimes." She nodded. "Me too." "For staying." We sat in that truth together for a moment. Then she said, "But guilt only matters if it teaches you something." She was right. I learned to listen more carefully. She learned to trust her instincts. Her child learned what safety feels like before learning what fear does. And maybe that's the real ending. Not a punishment. Not a confrontation. Not even a reclaimed apartment. But a child growing up watching a parent choose dignity over endurance. Years from now, that child may not remember the van, or the gas station, or the night that changed everything. But they will remember this: that when life became unsafe, someone stood up and said, "This is not acceptable. You deserve better. And you are not alone." That is how cycles end. Quietly, decisively, one choice at a time. The years that followed were quieter, but they carried a weight far heavier than any shouting or conflict could. My daughter didn't just reclaim an apartment. She reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her voice. And with that, she taught me something I hadn't realized I needed to learn myself. It was never about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to herself that she deserved better. And in the process, she reminded me why we fight for the people we love, not for pride, not for revenge, but so they can stand in the sunlight without fear. Her home became more than a building. It became a sanctuary. Every corner carried small victories. The first night, she slept without looking over her shoulder, the laughter of her child echoing freely through the rooms, the quiet certainty that no one could ever take that away again. Each morning, she would open the windows wide, letting sunlight spill in, and I could see in her eyes that this wasn't just light on the walls, it was light on her spirit, unbroken and brilliant. Sometimes she would pause while unpacking or arranging furniture, look at me and say, "I almost didn't believe this was possible." And I would remind her, "You didn't almost do it. You did it." Because it wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was determination, courage, and refusing to accept someone else's version of reality as her own. Even her child began to understand safety and love in ways that words could not describe. They learned that a home is more than four walls. It's a promise kept, a refuge, a place where fear has no claim. Watching them grow, I realized that protecting someone doesn't always mean shielding them from harm. Sometimes it means giving them the space, the tools, and the confidence to reclaim what belongs to them. And as for me, I learned that being a parent is never just about the early years. It doesn't end when your child grows up or moves out. Sometimes it begins again, at moments we never anticipate, at a gas station in the middle of the night, in a van where fear has taken residence, in a small, trembling voice that whispers for help. That night taught me a truth I carry with me every day. The most important thing a parent can give is permission. Permission to leave. Permission to fight. Permission to rebuild. And above all, permission to believe that they are worthy of safety, respect, and love. When my daughter finally stood fully in her own strength, I didn't feel the need to step in or take control. I watched her. I listened. I made sure she knew I would always be there, but only as support, never as a substitute for her courage. And she flourished. She became careful with her trust, precise in her decisions, and yet gentle in her interactions. She didn't harden or become bitter. She simply learned that life could be faced with eyes wide open and heart intact. Looking back, I know the gas station, the van, the tears, they will always be a part of our story. They are the shadows that make the sunlight brighter. They are proof of the wrongs that can be corrected, the lives that can be rebuilt, and the love that can never be taken away if you fight for it the right way. Sometimes, late at night, I sit quietly in my own room and think of that moment. The van, the cold air, the child clinging to their mother. I remember saying those words that changed everything. Get out.
Come with me. Now.
And I realized that those words were not just for her, they were for me as well. They reminded me that courage is not always loud. It is sometimes quiet, steady, and immediate. It is showing up when no one else will. It is choosing action over doubt, protection over fear, and love over complacency. In the end, the apartment, the legal battles, the confrontations, they were all secondary. The real victory was the restoration of what truly matters: dignity, safety, and trust. The real victory was watching my daughter take her rightful place in the world, standing tall, and knowing that no one could ever make her doubt her worth again. And that, more than anything else, is what I carry with me now: the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, with the right support and the courage to act, people can reclaim their lives, their homes, and their hearts. That even when it seems like the world has turned against you, there is always someone willing to say, "You do belong. You are safe. You are not alone." That is the true power of love, the true strength of family, and the lesson that will never leave me, nor her. Because sometimes the story doesn't end with a fight, a courtroom, or even a victory over those who wronged you. Sometimes it ends with life itself resuming, brighter, steadier, and filled with the quiet certainty that what was lost can be found again, and that some bonds, like a father's love, never break.